The most dangerous lie is not the one screamed in anger, but the one whispered with a tear in the eye, and my husband, Richard Sterling, was performing a masterpiece of deceit in our living room. Outside, the Manhattan skyline was drowning in a gray winter mist. Inside, Richard was pouring me a glass of sparkling water with a hand that trembled just enough to look authentic, but steady enough not to spill a drop on his $5,000 cashmere sweater. Richard is, or was, the CEO of Sterling Ventures, a private equity firm that swallows small companies whole. He is 50 years old, maintains the physique of a triathlete, and possesses the emotional depth of a spreadsheet. After 20 years of marriage, he had decided to restructure his domestic life, which meant trading me, his 45-year-old wife who had supported him when he was selling penny stocks from a basement, for a 24-year-old PR consultant named Chloe who thought assets referred only to physical features. But Richard didn't just want a divorce. He wanted a total victory. He wanted to leave the marriage with his fortune intact and his conscience clear, painting himself as the victim of a cruel market. "Catherine, please, you have to understand," Richard said, sliding a thick legal document across the marble coffee table. He sat opposite me, burying his face in his hands for a moment before looking up with bloodshot eyes. "The firm, it's gone. The Asian markets collapsed last quarter. The liquidity crisis in the tech sector, it wiped us out. I'm not hiding money, Cat. There is no money." I looked at the document. It was a settlement agreement. It offered me the deed to our small vacation cottage in Vermont, which I knew had a leaky roof and outstanding property taxes, and a monthly alimony of $2,500 for 3 years. In exchange, I would waive all rights to his future earnings, his company shares, and any offshore holdings. "I'm trying to protect you," he continued, his voice cracking with rehearsed desperation. "If we go to court, the creditors will come after everything. They'll take the Vermont house. They'll take your jewelry. This is the only way to salvage something for you. Sign this, and I'll take the heat for the bankruptcy alone." He reached out and squeezed my hand. It was a cold, calculated touch. He was banking on the fact that I had been a housewife for the last 15 years. He remembered me as the woman who organized charity galas and chose the curtains. He had conveniently forgotten who I was before the galas. He had forgotten that when we met, I wasn't arranging flowers. I was a senior forensic accountant for the IRS, specializing in white-collar tax evasion. I was the one who had designed the original tax shelter structure for his first company. I looked at his face. I saw the micro-expressions of contempt hidden behind the mask of sorrow. He thought I was stupid. He thought I was a relic to be discarded cheaply. "Richard," I said, keeping my voice small and trembling, shrinking into the sofa to look smaller. "Is it really that bad? The Cayman accounts? The shell company in Liechtenstein?" He shook his head vigorously. "Empty. Drained to pay the margin calls. I'm ruined, Catherine. I'm doing this for you." I picked up the pen. I hesitated, letting my hand shake. I saw the flash of triumph in his eyes, a predator seeing the trap snap shut. He was already mentally spending the millions he had hidden from me, imagining his new life with Chloe on a yacht that he claimed didn't exist. "Okay," I whispered. "I trust you, Richard. I know you wouldn't lie to me." I signed the paper. Richard let out a breath he had been holding for weeks. He snatched the document, his sorrow vanishing instantly, replaced by a businesslike efficiency. "You made the right choice, Cat. Really. I'll have my lawyers file this tomorrow. You should probably start packing. The real estate agents are coming on Monday." He stood up, checking his Rolex. "I have to go meet with the liquidators. I won't be back for dinner." He walked out of the apartment without looking back, the spring in his step returning before he even reached the elevator. He thought the war was over. He thought he had just pulled off the greatest heist of his career, stealing our life's work right from under my nose. He didn't know that I had signed with my maiden name. He didn't know that the settlement agreement was legally void because of it. And most importantly, he didn't know that for the last 6 months, while he was working late with Chloe, I hadn't been crying in bed. I had been accessing his laptop via a mirror port I installed on our home router. I had every keystroke. I had the IP addresses of the servers in Malta. I had the passkeys to the crypto wallets he thought were untraceable. Richard had invited me to a game of poker, thinking I didn't know the rules. He was about to find out that I was the one who built the casino. I walked to the window and watched him get into his sold Bentley waiting at the curb. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 15 years. "Agent Miller?" I said when the voice answered. "It's Catherine. Catherine Vance. I have a file you're going to want to see. It concerns the insolvent Sterling Ventures. And yes, I have the ledger." There is a specific kind of arrogance that comes with believing you have committed the perfect crime. It acts like an anesthetic, numbing you to the danger standing right in front of your face. 3 days after I signed the agreement, we sat in the sterile glass-walled conference room of Richard's law firm on Fifth Avenue. Richard was glowing. He sat next to his shark of a lawyer, a man named Sterling, no relation, just similar ambition, tapping a gold fountain pen against the mahogany table. I sat alone on the other side, wearing a simple black dress, my hands folded in my lap, looking at the panoramic view of the city Richard believed he still owned. "Let's wrap this up," Richard said, checking his watch. "I have a flight to catch. Catherine, the movers are scheduled for tomorrow at 8 a.m. I assume you've packed the personal items listed in the addendum." His lawyer pushed a final decree across the table. "This just formalizes the separation based on the financial disclosures provided last week. Since Mrs. Sterling has already agreed to the insolvency terms, this is just a rubber stamp." I didn't reach for the pen. Instead, I reached into my tote bag and pulled out a single gray USB drive and a red file folder. The sound of the plastic drive hitting the polished wood table was quiet, but in that silent room, it sounded like a gunshot. "I think there has been a misunderstanding," I said, my voice steady, devoid of the trembling I had feigned in our living room. "We aren't here to finalize the divorce, Richard. We are here to discuss Blue Water Holdings." Richard's hand stopped tapping. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the air being sucked out of the room. "I don't know what that is," he said, but his eyes betrayed him. They flickered, just for a millisecond, toward his lawyer. "A tell." "Don't," I warned him softly. "Don't insult my intelligence. Not today. Blue Water Holdings. Registered in Malta on November 4th. The same day you told me the Asian markets were crashing. It's a shell company, Richard. And it's the sole beneficiary of the crypto wallets you thought were anonymous." I opened the red folder. It wasn't a legal brief. It was a spreadsheet. A forensic accounting ledger. "I know about the $12 million you siphoned from the company pension fund," I continued, reading the numbers upside down. "I know about the consulting fees paid to Chloe's PR firm for work that was never done. And I know that the bankruptcy of Sterling Ventures is a fraudulent construct designed to defraud both your shareholders and your wife." Richard stood up, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. "This is illegal. You hacked my private accounts. This is inadmissible." "Actually," I smiled, a cold, sharp expression that made him take a step back, "I didn't hack anything. You logged into your offshore accounts using the home Wi-Fi. The same network where I am the administrator. You walked the evidence right through the front door." His lawyer grabbed Richard's arm, trying to silence him, realizing much faster than Richard that they were in quicksand. "Mrs. Sterling, if this is an attempt to renegotiate the settlement." "There is no settlement," I cut him off. "The document I signed 3 days ago? I signed it Catherine Vance. My maiden name. I haven't legally been Catherine Vance for 20 years. That contract is void. Which means the marital assets are still frozen. And since you just admitted to hiding them." Richard looked at me with pure hatred. "You want money? Is that it? Fine. I'll give you $5 million. take it and disappear. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. You still don't get it, Richard. You think this is a negotiation. You think I'm here to get a better alimony check. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the street below where flashing blue lights were silently converging on the building entrance. I didn't come here to negotiate, I said, turning back to face him. I came here to say goodbye. Goodbye. Richard stammered, his sweat now visible on his forehead. You see, I checked my own watch, mimicking his earlier gesture. When I found the ledger, I had a choice. I could sue you, which would take years. Or, I could call my old friends at the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. You remember Agent Miller? He was the best man at our wedding. He's been trying to catch a whale for a decade. Richard rushed to the window. He saw the federal agents pouring out of the SUVs, blocking the revolving doors of the lobby. He saw the end of his world. He spun around, panic finally shattering his mask. Catherine, call them off. I'll give you everything. The company, the house, the offshore accounts. Just tell them it was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, Richard, I said, picking up my purse. It was an audit. And you failed. The elevator doors at the end of the hall dinged. Heavy footsteps approached the glass doors of the conference room. Men in windbreakers with FBI and IRS emblazoned on the back came into view. I walked past Richard, who was now trembling, clutching the edge of the table to keep from collapsing. I leaned in close, whispering into his ear one last time. You were right about one thing, I said. You said I needed to start packing. I suggest you do the same. I hear federal prison is cold this time of year. I walked out of the conference room just as the agents walked in. I didn't look back as they read him his rights. I took the elevator down to the lobby, stepped out into the cold Manhattan air, and hailed a cab. The mist had cleared. The city looked beautiful. Victory is a sedative. It relaxes your muscles, slows your pulse, and makes you lower your guard, which is exactly why it is the most dangerous moment in any conflict. I was sitting in the back of the yellow taxi, watching the flashing lights of the police cruisers fade into the distance behind me. My phone was in my hand, the screen displaying the live feed of the offshore accounts I had been monitoring for months. I expected to see the numbers frozen, locked down by the federal seizure order I had just initiated. Instead, I saw the numbers dropping. $42 million. $38 million. $30 million. My stomach dropped faster than the balance. The digits were spinning like a slot machine in reverse. Someone was draining the accounts. No, I whispered, tapping the screen frantically. That's impossible. Richard was in handcuffs. He was currently being shoved into the back of an SUV by 2 IRS agents. He didn't have a phone, a laptop, or even a smartwatch. He couldn't be authorizing a transfer of this magnitude. I looked at the transfer destination. It wasn't a government seizure account. It was a tumbling service, a digital washing machine designed to mix cryptocurrency until it's untraceable. Once the money hit that mixer, it would be gone forever. I had made the classic mistake of the arrogant chess player. I was so focused on capturing the king that I had forgotten the queen can move across the entire board. Chloe. I had dismissed her. I had profiled her as a 24-year-old decoration, a PR consultant whose only job was to look good on Richard's arm. I thought she was the prize Richard bought with the stolen money. I never considered she might be the getaway driver. I checked the geolocation of the active login. It wasn't coming from the penthouse. It was coming from Teterboro Airport, New Jersey. Private hangar for driver. I shouted, leaning forward and startling the man. Change of plans. Take the Lincoln Tunnel. We need to get to Teterboro. Now. Lady, that's across the river, traffic is. I will give you $500 if you get me there in 20 minutes, I snapped, tossing a wad of cash onto the passenger seat. The driver didn't argue. He slammed on the gas and swerved across 3 lanes of traffic. I pulled out my laptop, tethering it to my phone as we sped toward the tunnel. I needed to slow her down. I couldn't stop the transfer without the private key, but I could flood the network, create a bottleneck. It was a crude tactic, like throwing rocks at a tank, but it was all I had. We hit the tarmac 18 minutes later. The security gate was open, likely bribed or broken. I saw it immediately, a sleek Gulfstream G650, engines whining, heat shimmers distorting the air behind the turbines. The stairs were still down. I threw the cab door open before the car came to a complete stop and ran. The wind was biting, whipping my hair across my face, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt only the adrenaline of the hunt. I reached the bottom of the stairs just as a figure emerged from the cabin to retract them. It was Chloe. But she didn't look like the vacuous socialite I had seen in the tabloids. She was wearing a gray tactical tracksuit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, and she was holding a tablet with a calm, surgical focus. She looked down at me, and for the first time, I saw her eyes. They weren't scared. They were dead cold. "You're late, Catherine," she shouted over the roar of the engines. Her voice was steady. Richard was the distraction. "You surely realize that by now." "Shut it down, Chloe," I screamed, gripping the handrail. "The feds know about the accounts. If you take off, you're an accessory to a federal crime. You'll spend 20 years in prison." She smiled, a thin, pitying curve of her lips. "Richard is going to prison. I'm going to the Maldives." You see, Richard thought he was the mastermind, but he couldn't even convert a PDF. Who do you think set up the encryption? Who do you think wrote the code for the shell companies? My blood ran cold. It wasn't Richard. It had never been Richard. He was just the greedy face of the operation. Chloe was the architect. You played him, I realized, shouting to be heard. You set him up to take the fall. I expedited the inevitable, she corrected, tapping the screen one last time. Transfer complete. Goodbye, Catherine. You can keep the apartment. I prefer the cash. She hit a button on the wall, and the motorized stairs began to lift. I had seconds. If that plane left the ground, the money was gone, and the only person who could prove my innocence regarding the initial setup, Richard, would be rotting in a cell while the real thief vanished. I didn't think. I didn't calculate. I lunged. I grabbed the rising railing of the stairs, my feet dangling off the tarmac as the hydraulics groaned. Chloe's eyes widened in genuine shock. She hadn't expected the forensic accountant to be an action hero. "Are you insane?" she screamed, rushing to the door to kick my hands loose. "I'm not letting you leave with my retirement." I grunted, pulling myself up, adrenaline giving me strength I didn't know I possessed. I scrambled onto the platform, tackling her just as the plane began to taxi. We crashed onto the floor of the luxury cabin, the tablet sliding across the carpet. The pilot, unaware of the struggle, throttled the engines forward. The plane lurched. We were rolling. The door was still open. And $40 million was sitting on a tablet sliding toward the exit. Physics, much like finance, is governed by momentum. Once a heavy object is in motion, stopping it requires a violent correction. The Gulfstream was accelerating, the tarmac blurring beneath the open door. Inside the cabin, gravity became a weapon. Chloe kicked out, her boot connecting with my shoulder, sending a shockwave of pain down my arm. She wasn't fighting for her life. She was fighting for the algorithm, scrambling on her hands and knees toward the tablet that was sliding dangerously close to the gaping exit. "Let it go," she screamed, her hair wild, the composure of the boardroom completely shattered. "You're going to kill us both. I'm not letting you win." I gritted out, lunging forward. I didn't grab her. I grabbed the leg of a bolted-down leather armchair to anchor myself and swung my other leg out, hooking the tablet with my heel just as it tipped over the threshold. The plane was nearing takeoff speed. The wind was a hurricane now, roaring into the cabin. Then, the world tilted forward. Screeching rubber drowned out the engines. The pilot had finally seen the wall of flashing red and blue lights blocking the runway. He slammed on the brakes. The deceleration was brutal. We were thrown forward like ragdolls. Chloe flew past me, tumbling toward the cockpit door, slamming her head against the bulkhead with a sickening thud. The tablet skidded across the carpet and came to a rest against my ribs. The plane shuddered to a halt, the smell of burnt rubber filling the air. Silence returned, heavy and ringing. I gasped for breath, clutching the tablet to my chest. I looked at the screen. The transfer bar was stuck at 99%. Connection interrupted. The money was in limbo, suspended in the digital ether, neither hers nor lost. "Game over," I whispered, my voice raspy. Federal agents swarmed the plane seconds later, weapons drawn. They found me sitting in the passenger seat, bruised and disheveled, holding the evidence. They found Chloe unconscious near the cockpit, the mastermind reduced to a concussion case. 3 days later. The Metropolitan Correctional Center is a gray, soulless place, designed to strip away color and hope. I sat behind the thick plexiglass of the visitation booth. Richard walked in. He looked 10 years older than he had 3 days ago. The Italian suit was gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He sat down, looking at me with a mixture of confusion and pleading. "Cat," he said, his voice trembling. "Thank God you came. You have to tell them. Chloe. She tricked me. I didn't know about the shell companies. I didn't know she was stealing the pension fund. I was a victim." I picked up the phone receiver on my side of the glass. "You weren't a victim, Richard. You were a tool. A blunt instrument she used to break the lock." "But I can testify against her," he pleaded, pressing his hand against the glass. "If we work together, we can get the money back. We can make a deal. I can come home." I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just the cold, clinical detachment of an auditor closing a file on a bad investment. "The money is safe, Richard," I said calmly. "The feds recovered the private keys from Chloe's tablet. The funds have been seized. They will be used to pay back the investors you defrauded, the employees whose pensions you stole, and the creditors." "And us?" he asked, hope flickering in his eyes. "What about our share?" I smiled, and for the first time in months, it was genuine. "There is no us, Richard. And there is no share." I cooperated fully with the DOJ. In exchange for handing over the ledger and stopping Chloe, they granted me immunity for any incidental involvement in the company's past tax structures. I walked away clean. I stood up, smoothing down my skirt. "But you," I continued, looking down at him. "You signed the fraudulent bankruptcy papers. You authorized the transfers, even if you didn't understand where they were going. You are the CEO. The signature is yours. The crime is yours." "Catherine, please," he shouted, tears streaming down his face now. "Don't leave me here. I have nothing." "That's not true," I said, hanging up the phone. I leaned close to the glass, my voice muffled but audible. "You have your legacy. You always wanted to be remembered as a man who made an impact on the market. Well, congratulations, Richard. You're going to be the case study in every forensic accounting class for the next 20 years." I turned and walked toward the heavy steel doors. "Catherine!" His muffled scream followed me. "Catherine!" I stepped out into the bright winter sunlight of Lower Manhattan. The air was crisp. I hailed a cab, not to chase a plane this time, but to go to a small coffee shop in Brooklyn where I could finally read a book without looking over my shoulder. The ledger was balanced. The account was closed. And for the first time in my life, I was completely, wonderfully solvent. Do not assume the ledger is closed. There are more secrets, covered-up betrayals, and cold-blooded acts of vengeance waiting in the archives to be unearthed. If you wish to lift the lid on the next file and see the truth hidden in the shadows with us, subscribe to the Heirloom Scars channel now. Turn on notifications, because in the next story, the stakes will be significantly higher.